Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Research, Innovation, and Scholarship Brown Bag Lunch and Learn series today. We have a great presentation today from Ross Bigelow, Georgian's Program Coordinator in Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence, and our Faculty Lead Researcher in Technology and Visual Arts. I would first like to acknowledge that the land I'm currently on today is situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. Furthermore, Georgian College acknowledges that all campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with Indigenous people whose lands and water across different continents and oceans we've been situated on at some point in our lives and we benefit from today. As an immigrant, I deeply appreciate the profound opportunity I've earned to live on this land and call it my home. It is a privilege to be part of a community that is rooted in such rich Indigenous history and culture. Georgian College shares my appreciation for the land and is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture, committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Please note, this session is being recorded and will be made available on the Henry Bernick YouTube channel if you wish to revisit any of the material or share with friends or colleagues. Now, I would like to introduce Ross Bigelow. Thank you for joining us today, Ross, to talk about MS Copilot. We are so excited to learn more about this topic that we have been hearing a lot about recently. As always, we encourage questions and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit your question, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Lale. And so welcome everyone to this short session talking about Microsoft Copilot. It's been just over a year since ChatGPT has been released, which really, I think, helped the rest of the world understand the power and capability of generative AI models. And we're really excited to see what the next year brings as we now integrate these models into our daily workflows. And it's very exciting to see what Microsoft has been doing over the last few months in terms of now taking AI and machine learning into the products and services that we are used to already using. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history and sort of how we got to where we are. Basically, in 2019, Microsoft invested $1 billion into OpenAI. And then in January of this year, they invested another $10 billion to license essentially GPT, DALL-E, and Whisper, which is all the OpenAI products and models. And they have been working very diligently over the past 9-10 months to integrate these services into Microsoft products. So things like Bing Chat and over GitHub Copilot, and there's a number of different other products and services that I'll talk about today. Before I do that, I just want to sort of do a quick little demo to show you what is now available for free in Windows 11. All you have to do is turn on your beta features in Windows 11, and you will be able to see your Copilot bar, which is just kind of right here on the side. And think of it as basically ChatGPT in your computer. So you can actually just say set dark mode. So I prefer, especially working at night, coding away, I prefer the dark mode. It's a little easier on my eyes. So I can just say switch yes. And now you can't really see from the presentation, but everything has now been switched over to dark mode. You can now say open Word, and it would open up Microsoft Word. So instead of having to go through and navigate settings and menus, you kind of now have one place to be able to do these sort of things. You can also, because Copilot has live internet access, one of the things you cannot do with ChatGPT is sort of get live news and what's happening in the world right now. So we can actually ask what's the current weather in Barrie, and we can get those results. And it will tell us that we're currently very snowy and under advisories and getting snow squalls. It does take a little bit of time to process, to fetch the responses, to get the data back. And again, it's creating a conversational model. It's parsing out data, extracting it from the internet, figuring out what's relevant to you, and putting it together in a way that sort of makes sense. In addition to just having ChatGPT type functionality here, you can also access some of the other OpenAI services like DALL-E to have it actually create images for you. So you can say, give me an image of a space cowboy or anything else. And what it's actually doing is going right now, running the OpenAI models to create and generate several different options of sort of what a space cowboy may look like, right? So these were just sort of live created right now. And sort of every time you do this, you get completely different results. So this is now part of Windows 11, and it is currently totally free. And so in terms of the Copilot family of products from Microsoft, it really started in 2021. They released GitHub Copilot, but that was actually a different product. It wasn't actually using OpenAI technology at all. It came from JetBrains originally. And so GitHub, you may be aware, is a repository for coders and developers if you want to create program code and build applications. Then back in February, they launched Bing Chat, which was part of the Edge browser as an extension, which then let you within the browser have access to ChatGPT type functionality. And then they also migrated the GitHub Copilot over to start using GPT technology. This September is when they launched the demo I just showed you, where they actually put Copilot into Windows. So by enabling a beta feature, you could access Copilot directly from Windows. And it's just an option in the start menu. And this is kind of meant to be like your personal AI companion. The next part that's really exciting is going to be when they integrate, and they just launched this November, into all the Office products. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So now you have the power of generative AI models integrated deeply into the entire Office suite. And then kind of where they're going within the next year is more the enterprise service offerings. So sales, service, and those types of things. But we won't focus on those because I think most people are more excited about the Office integrations. In terms of pricing, availability, things like that, GitHub Copilot is about $20 a month, but if you're an academic or a student, you get that for free. So you can just go in and sign up and sell them to your student, and they'll give that to you. The Microsoft Copilot that I showed you earlier is part of Windows 11. That is also that's totally free as well. And unfortunately, the Office integration one is something that we cannot get as an academic, because if you have to be an enterprise customer with either an E3 or an E5 license, which costs about $50 to get that for your organization. And then the Office integration component's about $30 extra a month. Okay. And so just to kind of show you some of the things you can do when you have AI models integrated directly into your applications. So this is just a code window for Visual Studio Code. Oops, let's get out of that. That really upset Zoom. Come on, unzoom, there we go. So we can do things like simple coding. So we can say, write a section of code that will count from 1 to 100 by tens. And because this is designated a Python file, it will create the Python code that would do that. So that's an extremely handy thing if you're trying to develop different applications. We can also, if we have an HTML page, create a simple web page for an accounting business. And what this will do is go off and actually create all the HTML code for that. Now, again, as a conversational model, it's meant to be a dialogue, right? This will be a very basic, bland, and you can start to either substitute stuff manually, or you can ask it to embed images and better designs and things like that. So what this is sort of showing is the creation or collaboration between AI models and people to improve efficiencies, to create new ideas and things like that. It can also be a very good time saver. So we can do something like ask, actually, I have this prompt, create an array of Ontario colleges, include full mailing address, phone number, and website. And so now what it's doing is going off and fetching the information. So we actually have a list of Ontario colleges, and oh, we can add more colleges here. Well, so I'm going to accept that response. And now I actually don't want to add them manually. I would rather have Copilot just continue to populate this for me. And so if I just sort of do a few pieces here, it would start to auto-populate. So this is some of the benefits that you're seeing. I'm showing it something that isn't probably familiar to a lot of you because a lot of you aren't developers, but you'll be able to do this in Word, in PowerPoint, in Excel. And you can just see now I can just hit tab. And now I have a whole lot more colleges. I can just keep pushing tab and it will keep auto-completing. Okay. So this is kind of the power that we're seeing available today in these types of products. Now, before I start talking about sort of what probably most of you are really excited about with the Office integrations, I need to talk a little bit about something called Microsoft Graph. And what Microsoft Graph basically is all of your data that Microsoft has in the cloud. So this would include everything, including your emails, your calendar, your invites, your task lists, all your files, your entire chat history, your whole email, everything about you, including who you work with and who you collaborate with. So with some of the colleagues I have here at Georgian, if I talk and I send a message in a particular style, that's going to allow the machine learning model to actually continue that correspondence using that style. Okay, so that's basically what Microsoft Graph is. So how does Copilot work? Well, essentially, it's built right into your Microsoft 365 apps. So again, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, Excel, and you're going to have this similar type prompt box that I've just shown, and you're going to fire off a prompt and you're going to say, I would like this. And that's going to go off to the Copilot engine where it goes through a process of grounding, which is basically trying to add some context or background into your into your prompt to really figure out what you're trying to do. And then it's going to send that grounded prompt off to Microsoft Graph, which again is your whole identity and all your content, to pull relevant items. And so in the background, just from you typing that prompt, it's going off, figuring out the context of what you're asking for, and then fetching all of the relevant information that it thinks it will need. Then it's going to modify the prompt and send it off to a large language model, which is what most people know is like GPT, right? So in addition to just having what the user prompted, it has all the data that Copilot feels is relevant, and those together are going off to this large language model. And it's going through similar to what, if you've ever used ChatGPT, it will run that type of functionality, and the large language model will then come back with a response. Depending on if it needs additional data or other pieces, it goes back into your graph and pulls additional relevant data. And again, it goes through another grounding process just to make sure that it's answering what it thinks what you're looking for. And you're not kind of getting, like some of you used ChatGPT before, you just get stuff way out in left field. Because this is all trained on your information, you get more contextually aware answers to your job role and your function. So after that comes back, Basically, now this is where the Copilot system integrates directly into the various applications, and it just seamlessly puts those results in various formats. So if you're in Outlook, it can create an email. If you're in PowerPoint, it can create a slide or modify a slide. It has those types of integrations. So that at a high level is how things work behind the scenes. And so what does this mean for a user? So this is a very abbreviated list of some of the things you can do within Copilot. So within Word, you can edit and generate documents based on prompts. So again, sort of like using ChatGPT, except the answers go right into the prompt. It can also include things like formatting. So you can have Copilot create a memo based on a memo template that you have, and it will just populate the information for you automatically. Similar with Excel, you can actually do some data analysis, data formatting, creating charts and graphs and pivot tables and all those formulas that no one ever remembers and you have to kind of go in and look up all the time. And it's empowering and enabling business users to be power users without really having to worry about the nuances of formulas and equations. In PowerPoint, one of the exciting features is you can have a bunch of like OneNote rough notes from a meeting, and you can have all your notes there, and you can say, build me a PowerPoint based on my point form notes. And it will go off and it will create a slide deck with the key points and summarization of what's in those notes. It can pick appropriate slide design. It can pick appropriate images and sort of give you suggestions to, hey, here's what a PowerPoint could look like. In terms of Outlook, drafting emails, creating various lengths and tones, and whatever you type in that prompt, have it create an email for you. Teams is pretty exciting because you can actually, if you're like me and sometimes get double booked or missed a meeting, you can just quickly ask Copilot, what did I miss? And it will summarize the key components. You can scan the room and sort of get a sense of where everybody's opinions are on a topic. Who came up with these different ideas, or what is the main concerns of each of the people around a potential topic. So there's a lot of exciting things there that are available. And so let's just take a slightly deeper dive into what and sort of how this looks. And so in Word, you just sort of right click and you have the little Copilot icon, and you can have it either visualize your data as a table or rewrite a section. So in addition to having the call out on the side, you can get these edits and revisions depending on what you're looking for, and you kind of pick and choose different options. And again, you're not going to hurt Copilot's feelings if you just say, I don't like any of these. Can you please just choose something else? You can get a summary of the document. So within Word, you can just say, hey, can you please summarize this document for me? Or you can say, can you give me some ideas? Can you create an icebreaker for this activity? And because Copilot is contextually aware of the team setting, of the users involved, of where their interests lie, it can actually potentially put something together that's really engaging for that team. You can ask Copilot, because some of you have experienced these 1,000-page Word documents that governments tend to really love creating, and you can say, give me the key points on this, on each of the topics, and you can see what this is going to mean to your organization, right? And again, what's really exciting for me is the ability to repurpose content. So if I have particular proposal styles that I like writing, or templates of different things, I can actually just point form my notes and have it automatically create entirely formatted documents for me. Okay. So that's sort of some of the things in Word. In Outlook, there's a whole bunch of different features, and my favorite is actually having Outlook just automatically create emails for me. So you just say, draft an email with Copilot, tell it what you're looking for, and say like, hey, I want a response to tell the client that it's going to be late for 2 weeks. Generate a response. It comes up with one. And then you actually have some settings here to pick the tone of what you're doing. And I love the make it a poem. That's a spectacular tone, right? So I think once we have this, I'm just going to respond. All my emails will be poems from now on. And so that's one of the exciting features. The other one supports internationalization. So a lot of times we have to work and communicate with people who don't necessarily speak the same language. And rather than going out to Google Translate, we can actually draft responses just with our language and say, this is what I want to say in this language. And you can get the responses, although I wouldn't be able to read that and tell if it was accurate and actually what I wanted to say, but those are some of the features that you get. Okay. In PowerPoint, sort of what this looks like, and this is sort of what I was talking about earlier, you can go in and say, hey, create a presentation based on this document. And it can be a OneNote document, a Word, anything like that. And Copilot will go in and basically create a very basic slide. And then you can refine this. You can highlight a slide and say, make this more concise, or elaborate more here, or pull in more data, or I don't like this image. And it's just like having a personal assistant within PowerPoint that will go in and do all the functionality that you're looking to get done. And some of the features in Excel that are very exciting is you don't necessarily have to know all these equations and formulas and how to do all of these things. You just need to know what you're looking for. So if you have this large table and you want to analyze the revenue and just sort of say, what are the key trends here? So you can actually get some data analysis directly from Excel just by asking. And you can have it create charts and graphs. You can have it highlight what were the main influencers on our sales or on growth. These are things that would take analysts a fair bit of time to create and produce manually. And now on the fly, business owners can actually just start asking through prompting. So this is, again, sort of like a democratization of AI and machine learning, allowing everybody to use it without having to worry about what's actually happening in the back end, right? So we can have, you can do what if scenarios. So you can say, well, what if we sell 20% more of this product over the next quarter? What's that going to mean to our growth and our profit and our margins and our revenue and all those types of things? This is, I don't remember what this one is. This is where we can modify the table structure. So analyze the business results and summarize. Oh, that's the same one. Okay, we'll move on to Teams. Okay, so Teams, one of my personal favorite ones is just, again, we know that we already have auto transcription features and things like that, but now we can actually click on a recap. So if we're ending the meeting, getting close to winding down, we want to make sure, okay, these are the things we need to focus on. These are the key action items. These are the deliverables. These are who's going to do what. And once we have this, we can actually do things like have Copilot draft an email to each individual person and basically to ask Copilot, hey, can you create an email that sort of reminds each person of what they need to do and their deliverable and their due date. And all of that now can be integrated into an automated message, including a calendar reminder if the user wants that type of setup, depending on the individual. And it's like some people like to have block like a half day to do stuff ahead of time. If that's 3 days ahead, you can have all these types of settings. So you can do things like ask, what's the mood of the meeting? Are there any unresolved questions? What are the key takeaways? Can you draft an outline or a presentation? What questions? Can you summarize this in a non-technical way? Sometimes some of these conversations have a lot of acronyms that people get lost in. So can you just tell me what this means? So just kind of having that instant access without leaving the meeting to go somewhere else to be able to find the information you're looking for. Being able to extract sentiment as well, right? So who's most excited about this? Because now I can identify who my champion is around the topic and I can go ask them to do the work. There's a lot of these types of features that are available. Okay. So that in a nutshell is what's currently available today from Microsoft. And this is where we are. And before we get into the next part with the Q&A, I just sort of wanted to talk a little about some of the prompt engineering and sort of some of the things that make good prompts and some of them that don't. And this is directly from the Microsoft Copilot prompting toolkit, which is basically a 3-page PDF that you can get, but I'm showing it right here. And what you want to do is tell Copilot exactly what you're looking for. So there's sort of some key verbs that will really help make sure that you're getting the best results, right? So you can ask Copilot to ask, like, what is this project? Who's working on it? So you're extracting knowledge. You can ask it to edit text, transform documents, summarize, create, catch up. So those prompts and how you phrase things are very, very important, right? And what you want to do is, again, you want to describe the goal very clearly. What's the context? What's the source of the information? And what's the expectation, right? So generate 3 to 5 bullet points to prepare me for a meeting with this client to discuss this project's branding campaign. Focus on email and Teams chats and not what other stuff you might have, because you want to focus on the personal correspondence you had with that client as opposed to what's out on the web and things like that. Use simple language, just so we can, that can frame your next meeting with the client. Hey, these were things we talked about. What do you want to do with them? So things to keep in mind. Basically, Copilot does have limitations, and as you experiment and start to see what those are, you'll become more aware of what it is and what it isn't. Be professional, you be polite. What will happen is, like with any AI model, whatever you input to the system is going to influence what you get back. So if you do not use professional language, poor grammar, or things like that, your results may reflect that. Okay. You want to start fresh. So make sure that you can just hit like reload to start another Copilot session. But when you jump around, that will influence the model. So if you start asking it about your planning your day and you're going through a bunch of business correspondence, and then you ask it for help around weekend advice, it's going to actually use your business correspondence to influence what you should do on the weekend, which I don't think anybody really wants to do. So you want to be careful with that. So as you move about, always make sure to reset your session. So that way previous conversations are not part of the context of what you're asking for it to do. And yeah, punctuation, grammar, capitalization, all of that sort of stuff matters, because that's what is being inputted to the model, and that's what's going to drive the results that you get back. Okay. So some things that you should do, right? Be clear and specific. Keep it conversational. Don't write a novel. Don't write a big essay. Just a couple of sentences, maybe a paragraph. And remember that Copilot is a conversational AI model. It's meant to be interactive. You don't just sort of ask it for results and then take those results and that's all you get. You can ask for revisions, ask for updates, treat it like a colleague, and keep it as short little snippets and little tasks. If you ask Copilot to do something really large, it's may or may not give you what you're looking for, right? You often want to use examples, ask for feedback, be legible, provide details, and again, be polite. So these were sort of some of the things we've already talked about. Things not to do, being vague. Just like when you're vague with your coworkers, you're going to get vague results back. So you want to be very specific with what you're doing. Requesting inappropriate or unethical content's never a good idea. And this actually can influence future results, right? So it's sort of like your Google history. What you ask for in the past will influence what you see in the future. So again, if you're using this in a professional capacity, you want to be careful there. Using slang, jargon, things like that. Again, that's how your results are going to come back. Right now, if that's how you communicate with your friends outside of work, maybe use your work email for personal correspondence, that's okay. Copilot will actually kind of pick that up as well. So if you ask it to draft an email to your friend, it may be very different than the email you ask it to draft to your boss. Okay. You want to be careful with giving conflicting instructions. Treat it like a brand new intern, right? That's just sort of learning how you like to work and what you're doing, right? And again, you want to avoid interrupting and changing topics quickly, because that will confuse the model. And it's sort of like if you go into your assistant and you give them 20 things all at once and they're not sure what the priorities are or where to look. I see some people nodding their heads. I guess there's people that have experienced that before. You want one task at a time. Take it step by step and be very specific and break it down, right? And then keep the conversation going, right? So use it to create ideas, to brainstorm. This is what generative AI is really good at, is creating ideas and coming up with concepts. You can get a lot of insight from your information, right? Let the models do the heavy lifting, the calculations, the analytics, the figuring out where there's relationships and pattern matching. Those are things that machine learning does very well. Building stories and sort of this concept of style overlay and creating content for different markets, right? So if you're trying to create a branding campaign targeted at elementary school versus high school versus college, the language is going to be significantly different, right, around each of those demographics. So Copilot does a really good job of picking sort of age appropriate content if you provide it that input and you say, I'd like to create a marketing campaign that's attractive to 12 to 14-year-olds, right? And that's what you will get back. Gaining insights, translating languages, and solving technical problems. Again, pulling resources and assets outside of the ecosystem and outside your personal graph is something that Copilot will do, just like you see with Bing Chat, right? So what I was sort of showing earlier, you can actually reference current weather conditions and other data points that are not just part of your own data set. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lale to kick off the question and answer session.
Perfect. Thank you. Such a great presentation, Ross. So I've just learning, and I had a glance at the questions. I had few questions myself, but I just found my questions in the question list as well. So I will leave it with Lauren to facilitate the Q&A, if it's okay. And thank you again.
Thank you, Lale.
Awesome. So we have some questions from the chat. One of the first questions is, how do you activate Copilot?
Okay. So if you have Windows 11 and you've updated, there's actually an option to, you just go into your system settings, check for update. And I'm not sure 100% if you still have to do this. I think this was the latest version, but you just say, where did it go? Actually, I think that's it. You just update to Windows 11 with that version because it's now generally available. And if you turn that on, it should just show up. And then what you will get is this little Copilot preview down on the bottom. Okay, so that's the Windows 11 version. The other ones that I showed around GitHub or Office, you have to have subscriptions for, and you just sign up through your corporate account.
So a question from a Georgian staff member, do we have access to Copilot currently?
No. So Microsoft's not made it available yet to academic institutions. And in talking with our own IT department here at Georgian, the way the colleges negotiate Microsoft contracts, it wouldn't be till probably next year before it's available there.
So is it always required to have a license or running Windows 11, or can you use it on Office 365 accounts, if you're aware?
Yes, so you do have to have the enterprise Office 365 account. So that was sort of what I showed. Let me just go back here. Right, so you do have to have your own enterprise. E3 is the cheaper one. It's $50 a month, but then to get Copilot, it's an extra $30. So that's if you want the Office piece. There is Copilot either just released. I haven't tried this yet, but it's coming also to Windows 10. So they're going to support both. But this is kind of the household user version, and this is the corporate customer version with Office 365.
Awesome. So we have a couple of questions around sharing and access to information.
Mhm.
How do you know where the information will be shared or saved? Does conversations become part of a greater database, even outside of your organization or team?
Yep.
Is there any kind of privacy concerns with regards to this?
Great questions. I think this is why Microsoft is limiting it to enterprise right now, is they need to make sure they do this in an ethical and transparent way, which they've been very open around their processes and how this works. Essentially, within the organizational context, you're going to be protected with the overall compliance or privacy policy that your organization has. So your Microsoft Graph is already all the data that Microsoft has about you. And in these sort of conversations, as you're moving about, it's not like it's sharing my graph with my colleague's graph, right? So they're completely separate. So every query is still only querying your results. And it's not like with ChatGPT where you're typing this into a website and then that goes right back in. So there's a big difference there around that. So Microsoft is adding a layer of governance and compliance to make sure that your data is still staying as your data. Okay, and that was one of the big significant differences with Copilot over ChatGPT.
Because there are some concerns about proprietary documents, those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
confidentials.
So this would be, again, the permission levels that you have. So it can actually use not just the documents you've created, but any documents you have access to, right? So if you've shared documents with colleagues, that would all influence the results you get, but the results are never leaving your Microsoft environment, right? So it's not like it's going to share corporate secrets between different organizations.
We have a question about the beta function.
Yep.
How do you know where to locate those beta functions to turn them on?
I may have to look this up because actually I did this back in like August. But okay, we'll look at Space Cowboy again for a second. Windows 11 Copilot enable. We'll go with this one. All right. So as long as you've updated, and then, okay, it's right there. So you just turn on the preview, and then once it's enabled, it will just sort of show up in the bottom there. Okay.
So a good question. How do you know the information provided by MS Copilot is reliable?
You don't. It depends on what you're asking. If you're asking for create something based on the data you're provided, then it's your data that's being used to create the results. If you're asking about something generic outside of your environment. So if you're talking like a Windows 11 Copilot, I think there's actually a warning right there that says, hey, this may not be accurate data, because a generative AI's model's job is to make stuff up, right? Based on training data, based on influences, based on other results. So when you use like ChatGPT or the Windows version of Copilot, and you're saying generic things like using it like Google to search up new information, you may or may not get accurate information because it doesn't know necessarily, are you looking for facts or are you looking to tell a story? Right? It can do both.
We have a comment here. Copilot seems to integrate with Microsoft products. Google Gemini will likely integrate with Google products. Salesforce has their own AI model and many more exist.
Yep.
Is the future of AI tools limited to a series of walled off gardens that users hop between, depending on what they're working on, or do you see a move towards a more general AI model?
That's a great question with massive societal implications. I don't know if you want to have one AI to rule them all, right? I think we've seen historically that competition in technology is a good thing. And these models are going to be used for very different applications and different purposes. So if you're working in Salesforce products, you're going to want a model that really understands and has been trained to work with Salesforce applications. Likewise, with sort of what we were talking about here with Copilot and things like that. I mean, all of the internet cloud providers have thousands of models for you to choose from, right? That can vary from like personal information to healthcare. Each of these sectors, manufacturing, have unique requirements. So there's kind of a bit of a race out there to develop and train and create models that are really good at this application. And so I think it's going to be kind of like we see with websites, right? Where there's the millions and millions of websites, there's going to be millions and millions of models, and the users will go to the models that they want and need to use. To answer the walled off garden, there are also open source models that are similar, but they don't necessarily have the same level of funding that these commercial models do. So again, it's that whole diffusion of innovation cycle that you see.
Amazing. And so does Copilot work with voice to text software,
Yep.
such as Dragon, and how does that work?
So yes, and you don't even need to use Dragon anymore. You basically, with I think Windows 10 maybe. Sorry, let me just get out of presentation mode here. Doesn't want to get out of presentation mode. There we go. You can actually just click the microphone right here. Right. And you can say, what's something you wanted to look up? What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow carrying a coconut? And so you can get that dictation. The other thing is within Windows, if you just hit Window key H, it automatically starts listening. And so you can see that everything I'm saying is actually showing up directly in my application. So voice is something I haven't actually typed an email in probably 3 years. Both Apple and Windows support this feature where you can just keep talking and dictating, and it really has improved my workflow. And so there's everything I just said.
That's so great.
Okay.
So with Copilot,
Mhm.
is there any opportunity for it to recognize bias? We know, for example, that applicant tracking systems tend to favor applications from one person over another.
Yeah.
Are there any checks and balances about equity-based decisions?
God, that's an extremely loaded question. There is always going to be biases in the data sets, for sure. It's going to be influenced by how you phrase something, will be number one. So if you are trying to steer the model with the question that you're asking for, that's going to influence the result, right? And again, that was even things like using proper punctuation, proper language, all those types of things in your prompting will influence it. Specific to Copilot, you can either add or remove bias, because sometimes you want, because you're looking for something very specific, right? So bias isn't always a bad thing in data models, but when you're talking about making sure that you're inclusive for an entire demographic, then that's a completely different thing. You want to make sure that the language you use is inclusive in your prompt, right? So that's number one. That at this point, all we're talking about is using your data sets, using your graph. So it depends on how biased is the Word documents, Excel, your OneNote documents. How biased is that information? Because that will influence the output in the results that you see.
Got a couple more questions left. If there's any questions from the audience, please just let me know, or type it into the Q&A, of course. So does Microsoft let Copilot access any other computer options? For example, when I say create a folder named folder 1, or delete apps that I don't use and are still occupying data?
Not yet, but it could. So currently, I think I can just, so let me try this, create a folder called testing in documents. I think it'll give me instructions on how to do it. So it is somewhat limited. Yeah, sorry, you can't do it. So here, if you want to do it, I'll go to Bing and give you the results. So it is limited, but that is somewhat by design, because in theory, someone could come up behind you and just click this and say, delete all my files. And then,
So do that.
yeah, you don't want that. Okay.
Okay, so our final question from the audience here is, what do you think should be faculty or employers' reactions and adaptations to generative AI in the classroom or in the workplace?
It should be, it's not one size fits all. There's very vast differences in needs, applications, possibilities, and opportunities, depending on what you're doing. Copilot is simply an extension of Office that automates the ability for you to create and edit and work within that ecosystem. If we take that to a broader spectrum of generative AI as a whole, it's the exact same idea. It's you're working collaboratively, more efficiently. You're asking generative AI questions to create content, resources, assets in a way that greatly improves your output and your performance. So it allows you and empowers you to be more efficient. So instead of you needing 3 months to do a task, you might be able to do something in a week or two, right? So it's that sort of mentality versus kind of, oh, this is just going to replace all of us, right? I don't think that's the route it's going to go.
Let's hope.
Okay.
Now I'll hand it over to Lale.
Thank you again so much, Russ, for this great presentation. I'm pretty sure all the audience like me, we've learned a lot, and we are hoping that we can get access to this tool sooner than later. And thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you will join us for our next Lunch and Learn session on Wednesday, January the 24th, where we will be joined by Nicole Norris, Director of Social Innovation, to talk about community wealth building and why it matters. I also want to mention that our annual RISE Symposium is being held on Wednesday, April the 3rd, 2024 at our Barrie campus and is open to everyone to attend. Watch our social media to register and learn more about the speakers and events planned for this great celebration of research, innovation, scholarship, and entrepreneurship across the college. Thank you all again for coming today. Have a great day.